Welcome back to Remote Work Bay. I have Chris Lee with me all the way from LA. Chris, could you tell us a little bit about your background and your story today?
Happy to, and I'm also very, very happy to be here with my very good friend Audrey. I all the way from LA, so I'd say this has been my home. Born and raised here, actually. I was born in Glendale. I was raised in the Valley, and I spent some good years in New York for college. And I've basically stayed here my whole life just because this is mainly what I do. I work in the entertainment business. I work in that industry. I've wanted to be sort of within that business from a very, very young age. And I'm very fortunate just to be able to, even in this day and time, to be able to have, that type of career working in this very cutthroat business as well. So I'm a kind of a unicorn in some ways when it comes to like staying in LA and working in this business, just because a lot of people who work in the entertainment business are often transplants. So it's always interesting whenever I have conversations with people, cast or crew or anything like that, and ask where I'm from, and I tell them this is my home. So
Right, and you're such a multi-talented person, Chris. Could you talk a little bit about all the different aspects of entertainment that you work in?
yes, everything. No, just kidding. I started from acting.
Yeah.
And it's funny enough, funny story. I remember the earliest part of me that felt very performative was actually when I think I went on some family vacation, small anecdote story. I'm already diverting. We're 2 minutes in and I'm already diverting to the left. But
For it.
when I think I was on a family trip somewhere and we were on a beach, and I remember they were playing, oh my gosh, I remember the song. They were playing Will Smith's Wild Wild West. And I
Wow.
remember just dancing on the beach, and I remember just everybody watching me. And I was like, like a tweenie. I was a little baby,
Mm.
and I remember just really enjoying that. And so that was the part of me that dancing kind of really kicked in at an early age. But acting was the first foray into that performative side. And from there, I had gotten into producing, I gotten into directing, I got into writing, a lot of the behind the scenes work, just mainly like, just as a producer essentially. And then now I've kind of accumulated all those different types of work within that industry, and made, just tried to work myself up as a business artist. I've currently kind of moved a little bit more into the voiceover world as well, just because I've been seeing a lot more of that work picking up. So I've just invested a little bit more time and resources into that. But I would say that's off the top of my head, the things that I do.
So many things.
Too many.
I know, exactly.
Mhm.
But, with this whole pandemic, you've been now quarantined for 5 months in LA. How has that affected your business, your ability to,
Right.
audition for things, produce new films? Where are you in that whole realm?
The first thing that I'd say to that is, it goes beyond business in some ways, and I absolutely it certainly did affect business, but like it really affected just kind of your mental health of life overall. And I think a lot of people can kind of agree as well, that people that I've spoken with, how much it affects not only their professional life, but how it then kind of affected very much their own personal life. I had booked a voiceover job. Literally, I was supposed to go into the studio like March 11th or 12th. And it was that specific week that, Eric Garcetti and Gavin Newsom basically said, hey, we're shutting down California. And so right in that week, my job got postponed, everything shut down. So it really has been this kind of a gut-wrenching punch to a lot of people, especially people who were in the middle of production. My partner, Imani, she was in the middle of production as well, and they just immediately shut down. So there was quite a bit of uncertainty and sort of like a lot of fear going on in terms of what was going to happen. Granted, things are now slowly picking back up. We're starting to see a little bit more of some traction and momentum of the business, but it's still very slow. A lot of it is based on protocols and guidelines, specifically from the CDC. And, we're just trying to work with the professionals, but also trying to be safe, but also understanding that people do want to get back to work, that people do want to try to find avenues to continue to do what they do. So even for myself, it certainly affected my business as an actor, but I've also seen that, with my current film that I have, I directed and wrote a feature film last year. And so we're currently in editorial and post-production. And fortunately, even though we were doing a lot of in-person meetings prior to the pandemic, we're able to do a lot more remotely, which is, again, very grateful. Like, we're in a very grateful position. If we were in pre-production about to go shoot, like, we're screwed. So there's goods and there's bad. And again, I know I'm certainly not the worst off compared to other people. So I very much take it very gratefully. But at the same time, it sucks. It sucks for everybody.
From my understanding, there was a pause in all production, right? When quarantine happened. When did Garcetti allow production to begin again?
I want to say it was somewhere in June or July. I think it was July. It was during one of those phases, right? They were talking about like phase 1, phase 2. And I think like once it got to a little bit more of a manageable place, they would open up production again. And I think that happened somewhere around, I want to say July, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, so from that point, even, Imani as well, she's, her production is picking back up next month, essentially. And I was able to do another job for a voiceover job just like, about 3 weeks ago as well. But again, under very different circumstances ultimately. So it's definitely been a learning curve for a lot of people. I mean, again, throwing another diversion there, but it's like my sister's a teacher, and it's just them like having to figure out how to, she's a music teacher, mind you.
Oh my God.
So it's like, how do you teach music over Zoom with like a bunch of people? It's crazy. Everyone has to get very creative.
It's interesting because I think a couple of my friends in entertainment as well have gone back to filming, but out of state. And they've had to, I believe they had to get a COVID test as one of the main requirements, and they have to continue to get tested on a weekly basis while they're on set. But I'm not sure if there are different requirements from state to state, city to city, and how all that works. How have you seen the entire industry pivot?
Definitely, I've seen where, like, for instance, in Atlanta, there was a production that created essentially a bubble, like the same exact thing that the NBA was doing. Oh, yeah. And that proved to be successful. Like, nobody got positive cases. So I think there's a lot of kind of like guinea pig style things happening where it's like some productions are going to try it this way, other productions are going to try it that way, and then other productions are just watching, kind of seeing like, oh, how's that going to work? And they'll kind of base it off of that. Exactly to your point, there are obviously other productions happening out of state that are a little bit more lenient when it comes to sort of the science of it at times, which, again, it's agree to disagree on how that ultimately works for people. But I think I know there's other productions that are doing, weekly tests 3 times a week. They'll do those things where they'll create like zones for people where, it's like only specific people interact with, like the actors, for instance, because the actors are the only ones really who are required to not be without face masks. So that's something that, to eliminate foot traffic, to eliminate just any possibility that somebody could be indoors, that again could have not as good air circulation as being outside, because a lot of productions are usually interiors, they're indoors, they're on sound stages, they're always like, a lot of people on set. So they're trying to find ways to mitigate that, to minimize the number of people that are required for the people that could potentially get it. So that's a lot of the pivot that I've seen. And for myself personally, I think, again, like I mentioned, that voiceover thing, where when production shut down, voiceovers did not stop, because video games and animation are all done relatively remotely anyway. So I actually took a little bit more time, a little bit more resources to invest into that, just because I knew, hey, like if you anyone who's in the business world right now, you can look at the stocks, like you notice that the video game industry is booming. So, me looking at that vertical thinking, oh, I got to keep my eyes on that, because even though I still want to very much be part of the production and the live action narrative world, I'm seeing a lot of great things happening, just based off of circumstance of what's going on over there. So I've definitely kind of pivoted in that ways as well, to kind of keep that parallel path going.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it seems like there's not really, in terms of safety, there's not like an industry standard from what I'm hearing.
Right. There definitely isn't any industry standard. There is, I know there is like a group within, I know within the DG, like the Directors Guild of America, different unions, for instance, like I know SAG-AFTRA, IATSE, that's the crew union. They're all like getting together and essentially talking about the specific protocols, whether it's having a health officer as well as a, COVID compliance officer on set. There is a lot of different and they're looking at everything, because again, it's as much as they want to get back to work, nobody wants that production is shut down. Nobody wants that, someone got infected, we have to shut down for 2-3 weeks. Like, so they are taking as much precaution as they can. But again, it's there's going to be holes, like things are going to happen. So it's really just kind of rolling the dice a little bit and seeing what happens. But, I'm hopeful. I try to be hopeful about it because what else can you do right now? So
yeah, actually, you just reminded me, coming from the event industry, there's people that are still trying to produce events at the end of the year, but
Right.
now they're hiring, what is it called? Like basically a COVID compliance officer that's on scene at whole time. So it's interesting because you wonder how these people get certified and what their responsibilities are.
Yeah, it's such a funny point because I'm on this Facebook group that looks for people that are hiring crew members and things like that, and there are people that say, "Hey, I am a CCO, COVID compliance officer," and you can literally, I didn't do enough research on this, but I'm like, it sounds like you can get this certificate fairly easily, like just through some number of hours online. But again, from what I had heard, it didn't seem like it was it wasn't as like verifiable essentially, or it wasn't as I don't know. It's not as much of a peace of mind in some ways for people.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah, but it is an interesting thing. Like look, no matter what, productions are going to cost more money now because like even craft services, which is on a set, it's basically all the snacks and the lunches that come out. That's gone. Like you can't have that anymore. You can't have people touching public food anymore. So even lunches, for instance, they're all going to be separated. They're all going to have their own boxes and you just get your lunch and that's it. So it's a very different, I think, feeling. And I haven't been back on set yet. So it's like, and I know Imani will be back in about a month or so. So we'll see, like, we'll see kind of how it all sort of plays out.
So interesting, this new norm, right?
Did you, I'm curious for you guys, like, well, in the event planning world, when it comes to like, because I know a lot of festival performers, but I'm sure you know plenty of them, and I know I know they're hard hit, but it's like when it comes to planning of them right now, are there you said that they're planning for them for the end of 2020 still, to assume that they can have groups larger than like 20?
So depending on the event, the production, the festival, they all have their own guidelines and their own deadlines for hosting these events. And
right.
I think I was talking to a buddy of mine. I don't know don't quote me on this, but he works for a conference called SEMA in Las Vegas.
Okay.
I believe it's a big car conference. And from the last time I chatted with him, which was 3 weeks ago, it was still on, and that's in November. It really depends. I mean, I was listening to the news a couple of weeks ago, and they were interviewing, I think, the event manager of the Troubadour in WeHo.
Okay.
And she was saying that their earliest that they're thinking that they're going to open back up is March 2021. Right. So I think similar to what you were talking about in the production world, it's different depending on the company and who's putting it on. Right. And so I think at this point, people are just placing bets.
Yeah. Too many unknowns still. I know we're all trying to follow the science of it as well. And, vaccine is going to be the paramount thing at the end of the day that changes how we can continue to work as well. But yeah, it's everyone's just trying to do the best that they can with what we all have. But again, it's just, it doesn't, I'm the first to like, I'm happy to say, like, it shouldn't necessarily, trump your safety as well, though. It's like there are real like safety issues when it comes to this as well. So it's definitely a tough situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, especially for artists, and just to get a little deeper into this, I mean, how are aspiring actors surviving during this time? Considering so many artists take on part-time jobs in hospitality, And, the hospitality space is completely struggling as well. I mean, what are people doing for side gigs?
It's a great question. I know a lot of my friends who are like, for instance, in New York, and obviously people here as well on both sides of the coast. It's hard. Like it's very, very hard. Like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's like to go back to work, but it's it's not necessarily safe. I know a friend of mine who, they had the restaurant owner essentially opened it back up because even though they knew that it was, perhaps not the safest, he has, they basically have like kind of undocumented workers that are working for them, but they won't have, they can't get unemployment. And like, he wants to take care of them because it's, again, it's like a family. So they open back up and, that the friend of mine who's like, now has to wait or bartend there, understands that and kind of goes back in. So it's, again, like every circumstance is different. I think people are trying to find creative ways to do work. I've seen people trying to get more into the virtual world, whether it's, helping out within social media worlds. And I find that a lot of people are trying to get creative, just making content as well when they're at home. So it's definitely not an easy thing. I think I personally am, I'm very fortunate that I have stuff that that was already happening, that I was already doing with like Dinner Party with my film. So I was able to at least just divert a lot of my resources and time into those avenues. But again, there are other people that I know who are just not like, they don't know what to do. And especially it's like in this business, I think I really wonder, it's like if you're just like coming in, if you're just trying to break into the business, it's like, this is one of those crazy like bumps on the road that like, what do you do from here? And I don't really have an answer for that other than to just say, like keep going, I guess. Like what else can you do besides, beefing up your, like reading a lot more, reading a lot of scripts, just keeping your muscles sharp as much as you can. I've said this to other people before, but like while this was happening, that I do think that this event, this global historical event, it will weed out a little bit of the people that didn't really have the fight in them, if that makes sense, because like if you really, really want it, you're still going to fight through it. But this is like one of those biggest tests where it's like, if this wasn't really for you, you'll know at this point, being like, oh, this isn't worth it. And in some ways I've experienced that too, just again, like seeing a little bit of a left track here, but just things that are happening globally and nationally from a social perspective, from a social justice perspective. Like there's so many things that are happening right now that make me think, oh, is doing this type of content really important right now to me? Or do I still want to continue to do the work that I do, but at least in the realm of helping the world, helping the dialogue of the world, of people being able to communicate with one another. Because right now, as without this be getting political in any way, but it's very divisive in how we think about things. So my work, I want to be able to help bridge that type of conversation as well. So that's something that I've really thought about during this pandemic, in terms of how do I not only survive financially, but also how do I survive just as an artist morally in some ways too.
Yeah, that's actually really fascinating. So I think like it's that shift in mindset and what's happening globally in our world today. And I don't think any of us can ignore that. We're literally in the heart of it, living in LA. And I don't know where you were when all of these riots and these protests were happening. But
right.
They were literally less than a mile from me. I could see the helicopters. I saw police cars burning. I personally had friends that had businesses that were looted. So it was really, really in your face, and to ignore that is, I don't know. I think it's difficult.
It's certainly a bigger conversation, and we probably won't be able to cover it in today's, but like it's a bigger conversation especially when it comes to Asian Americans and the plight of what's happening when it comes to social injustices in our country. Just because, again, much deeper conversation, very nuanced, but Asians in general, when it comes to how we've, sort of raised in this country, we are still people of color, but we also have a lens that, again, is like there's a lot of dialogue behind it. I'm basically telling myself to pull back. I'm pulling myself back on that, because once I start talking about it, Audrey, we won't talk about nothing else. So
we'll get an entire podcast. Okay, let's at least touch on this now that you're talking about it. But do you feel like you have a certain type of responsibility as one of the few Asian men on screen? What is it
100%.
like for you?
100%, 100% responsibility. I think it was like Will Smith said something like this, where he was like talking about fault and responsibility. It's like, it's not your fault if something happens to you, but it's your responsibility to take it upon yourself to do something about it. And you can look that through any lens of any circumstance. But for mine specifically, like, it's not my fault that Asian Americans in film and TV aren't portrayed as much authentically or genuinely, but it's my responsibility to make sure that I can push that out there. And so that's something that I really, really do, and especially with my film Dinner Party. And the film really deals with the small intricacies when it comes to like the lenses of society of like sexism and classism and racism and how we all look at it very subtly. So that's something that for myself, I really take it upon myself as a responsible thing to not, how would I best say, not like point my finger and this is what you're supposed to do, but rather than like, hey, let me shed a little bit of light and let me help create dialogue. That's like my biggest thing that I want to be able to help achieve, especially as a person of color, as an Asian male artist. And there are, it's not easy. We, like whatever the small rules that do get thrown out, however big they may be, there's still a big contingent of Asian actors. So we're all fighting for that the little bit of the pie. Yeah. So, and it's still, we're supportive community, but at the same time, there's also, as you know too, like I'm Chinese Japanese. There's sort of a nuanced layer of discrimination between Korean, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Filipino, Singaporean, like all of them. We all have a little bit of a little, yeah. So they're
categorized as one people, right? It's
right.
Just because you're Asian and you're Korean doesn't mean you're exactly the same as someone that's like Chinese or Japanese.
Exactly. Right? But and so this is where I play a little bit of the kind of the other side of the coin too, because I agree with that. But at the same time, there has become a little bit of this racial sensitivity of who can play what roles when you're Asian. Like if it's a Chinese role, it can only be played by a Chinese person. If it's a Korean person, it can only be played by a Korean person. Now, to an extent, I certainly believe in that. But at the same time, that's not how it works for almost any other race, especially when you look at like, our white actors playing, British people playing Russian people or Australians playing Americans. Like, it doesn't matter, but for Asians, it does. And so there's that hypocrisy that kind of comes into play. And that's something that, again, it only changes from the top. It's like that. It only changes from the top down. So that's something that even for myself, in the path that I'm working towards is I want to create, that inclusive community that isn't so sensitive towards those specific types as well.
Right. Well, so tell me a little bit more about Dinner Party.
Dinner Party. So it's my first feature film. I'm very excited about it. And the log line is very simple. It's basically, if you met your childhood friends today, would you still fuck with them? But it stems a little bit from kind of my upbringing. I was raised in this town called Calabasas, outside of LA, and it was basically just a white Jewish community, essentially. And there was just a small contingent of Asians, even smaller contingent of Latinos and Black. So within that realm, I grew up with a lot of white friends. So the idea is basically, these high school friends get back together after 10 some years after high school. And, they realize that they've changed just as much as the society's lens of racism, classism, sexism have all changed. All the while, there is this Brett Kavanaugh style court case that's happening in the background, very controversial, where a white prominent doctor is basically accused of sexual assault from a female coworker decades ago. Mm-hmm. And essentially in the third act, we find out the verdict. And then at the same time, we find out that somebody in our friend group did something inappropriate to one of our friends back in high school. And it comes to light at the dinner party. So the idea is, what do you do when you can see something on TV and you can sympathize with it, but then it's happening to your friends and it's in your circle? What do you do and how do you deal with it? And so we have a lot of different perspectives involved. It's a very diverse cast. It's something that I really reflected what I had grew up around. Just being an Asian American surrounded by white friends, and the subtle racism that I got, that I sort of was complicit to and played with, just to have, just to be assimilated, just to be liked. there's a lot of that kind of involved with it. So it's very close to home in a lot of ways. And I'm very excited. We just kind of finished our picture lock, and we're heading it into our color department, our sound department, and our music composers as well. So they're currently kind of diving in, and we're hoping to get it out some point essentially next year once we go through the festival circuit.
Wow. Well, congratulations, first off. It
Thank
seems
you.
like a very intense, dramatic film, which I'm excited to see myself. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but many films are premiered, right, and released through these various film festivals throughout the year. Are they still happening at all this year in some shape or form? Are people putting off releasing their films until after the pandemic? And how is that looking like? Because from my understanding, that's where these films are released.
Right. No, that's a great question. I would say I know that pretty much everything across the board in 2020 is canceled or going virtual. And we're targeting like the bigger festivals like, the Sundances or the Telluride or the Tribeca or the Toronto, South by Southwest. Like we certainly want to strategize in terms of which festival we want to kind of target for, obviously knocking on wood that we would be accepted by them. But we know that the early ones in 2021 are very likely going to still be virtual, considering that they may not have a vaccine at that point. So they wouldn't want to risk having hundreds and hundreds of people all congregating in theaters and networking events. So I do imagine like things will still continue to be virtual. But I do think that at some point, we even for ourselves, like we have to decide, is it better to get into something that is a virtual festival, but perhaps has a bigger name than an in-person festival that may not have as a big of a name. So it's like, those are the strategies that we also have to think about. But at the same time, I know that a lot of studios are probably they're probably yearning for content right now because like we're burning through it. Like there's all the production stopped and now they have all this content out there, but it's going to slowly run out. So even for ourselves with Dinner Party, we hope, knock on wood, that we're in a, sort of a unique opportune moment to be able to like get the film out, just because we hope that those studios and those festivals are looking for content as well. So it's kind of I couldn't give you a straight answer in terms of what's gonna specifically happen, but that's my take.
I was supposed to be at South by this year in March, and I think many of these films were already submitted to South by before. I mean, I think South by was actually canceled only a couple of weeks. Yeah. So what happens at that point? Do people does the board just view the video and then give out its awards at that point if it was virtual?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I actually don't know the ins and the outs of when it comes to those awards. I do know firsthand that a friend of a friend had a film premiere at South by. Yeah. Again, it's very sad that they couldn't get actual like in-person audience. But from there, I believe that film was able to get distribution on I think Amazon. So I do know that like you can still find distribution through those festivals because no matter what, like that's where studios ultimately pull from anyway. So I do think that even like in 2021, you can still submit things and then you can still find studios that are willing to purchase them and distribute them.
Well, good luck if you're planning to release in 2021.
That's the goal. That is the goal. I don't think it can go any sooner, but 2021 is basically where we are. And honestly, it's honestly just crazy because even when we were in pre-production last year, around like July or August, like we even thought about it, like, should we just push this to 2021? And honestly, we're so like grateful that we didn't, just because, like who knows, like who knows what could have possibly happened. And so we'll see. But
how do people find your film?
It's a good question. They can't right now.
Yes.
They won't be able to.
How do people find you or find more information about it? Do you have social pages?
We're definitely working on branding and marketing right now. It's sort of our like kind of our last phase in terms of it, and we're basically approaching that now because I was neck deep in editorial for the last. Oh man, I was in editorial for the last like 6 months, essentially, just editing the whole way. And now that we've kind of finished that, now that I have a little bit more free time, I can kind of rededicate resources to specifically branding, to marketing. So when it happens, we'll definitely have a little bit, like we'll have more social pages. We'll have, everything from Instagram to Facebook to websites. And then from there, we're kind of hoping to kind of do it from a grassroots feel, just because it is an independent feature. We feel that it's very topical. We have a lot of actors who are working right now. So hopefully it can be something that picks up its own steam just from a social perspective.
Got it. So I guess for now, people should just follow you and your personal page to find
Exactly. Just me. That's the most important thing, is just follow me. Just follow me and do all that. You just follow me. No. Just I'll certainly announce it and be a cheering mom about it, essentially, like when it's like coming in.
I will definitely.
Yes. I expect nothing less.
You know me, Chris. You know me. I wanted to make sure that we do address this, but how do artists like yourself find resources and support and help in a time like this right now? Someone that is not as integrated as you are, say they're a fresh newbie actress, actor coming to LA, or they maybe just came to LA and all of a sudden this pandemic hit. Where do they go? I
have a friend of mine. She's on the East Coast right now and coming back to the West Coast, and in a very kind of similar fashion. She's, I wouldn't say newcomer, but like, has sort of definitely put her feet in the water. But again, it's like with all of this happening, we have a conversation back and forth in terms of like what to do when it comes to finding managers, when it comes to finding agents. Like, look, those managers and those agents, because there's not as much casting opportunities right now anyway. Like, I do think that if you find the right time and place, you can get a general meeting with them, online, Zoom meeting, Skype meeting, FaceTime, whatever it is. The one thing that I really encourage is building up your skill set, so that once things are picking back up again, like, we're all going to lose a step or two. That's okay. Some people are going to lose a bigger step than other people. I would just say that try not to be, and I say this very gracefully, but try not to be someone who just gives up, I guess, like, or just kind of like lets the momentum deteriorate because they think, who the cares? Like, nothing is happening right now anyway. And that's a mentality that I can wholeheartedly understand, because even myself, every now and then I get that feeling of like, well, what's the point? It's 2020 and the world is like at times going to because of all the things that are happening. But that being said, I'm also very hopeful, because it's during these times that we really find resilience. We really find what works for us from just a self-awareness perspective, from a self-betterment perspective. So when it comes to like what you can do from your skill set wise, whether that's learning new skills, whether that's reading up on scripts, whether that's putting yourself on camera more, whether that's just practicing workflow when it comes to, if you're a musician, if you're an editor, if you're like a director, if you're a writer, just continuing to write. And I know like writers right now are probably gleeing right now at some points, because they're just like, I just stay home and write all day anyway, so I'm good. So it's like finding a way to shift your narrative a little bit so that you can stay positive, that you can stay kind to yourself. I think that's really important to, especially actors out there who are really kind of struggling, and then like they're hitting themselves hard, especially if they have like an opportunity or something and they're really like holding on to it, like it's very precious. Like, let that go, just because I think right now more than anything else, people's like that spiritual health, that mental health is very important to move forward, because there are people out there who may not have, partners like myself that I live with, or family members that they live with, or roommates. Some people are just by themselves, and that can be very hard just to kind of like get through something like that when you're by yourself. Like, yeah, you can FaceTime your friends, but at the same time, it's not the same as a real human interaction and connection. So, finding ways for yourself of what works for you is really important. I personally, I don't do it enough, but I personally need, I meditate as much as I can. I definitely try to just stay active as much as I can. It really starts with the body when it comes to that mentality that you have. So that's something in terms of just, I guess, support and resources. When it comes to community, I mean, even myself, like I have a couple of my friends that we do like almost not nightly, but like I'd say 2-3 nights a week, we all like hop on a Zoom call and we play like this virtual board game. And we're just like, and none of them are actors, none of them are performers, none of them are in the industry. They're all like in different parts of different parts of just businesses. And, we just just play the game. Like we just like escape from everything from a little bit, and we're just there, we're having a good time. And that's important. So like if you can find communities like that are just there for you and just there with you, I mean, that's very helpful too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was chatting with one of my other friends who is an artist.
Mhm.
And because so many marketing budgets have been slashed, I asked her the same question. I'm like, what are you doing now? What are you doing with your time? And I find that a lot of people are going back to school or even educating
Oh,
themselves in some way or form, right? Or picking up a new skill, right? So she's going back to school for like augmented reality design. How
mm,
interesting is that, right? So,
wow.
I mean, this is probably a good time for people to level up, right? Level up on something that you can learn and do from home, right?
Right, right. And I say that, and I 100% agree. And I only put an asterisk on that and to say only at your best pace. You
Yeah.
know, it's like I know because everyone is experiencing this very differently. Like we're all collectively going through this, but I think how we kind of get out of it, like we're just talking about, like it's not your fault that this pandemic happened, but it is your responsibility to do what you can to make the best out of any situation. And that's so much to ask for. I know of anybody at the end of the day. I really truly get that. But at the same time, I'm also in that position of like, what can we do? Like, what can you do to put yourself in a position to at least be like find success, not just from a professional standpoint, but just from like your own personal standpoint, because I think a lot of that is bleeding together in this time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely number one is self-care. That's
Self-care.
absolutely number one.
Yeah.
And if you got that and you're doing good there, then move forward. Move
I
forward.
agree.
I was telling my other friend the other day that I feel like whether people know it or not, I think everyone has a minor form of depression right now because, human beings are not made to be, isolated and indoors all day long. So I
Hmm.
think it's really important, like you said, to go outside, get some exercise. It starts with the body, especially living in a city with so many people that work in entertainment. I really, and art, I really feel for them, and I myself am an artist as well.
Right. I read somewhere where it's like because it's one of those phenomenons that we don't see the quote unquote end in sight. Like we don't know when this is actually ending. That's what's really creating this like heavier trauma on ourselves, because when there's grief and you don't see the end of the grief, like it compounds it in some ways. And again, like we're also just seeing how, just in general, just even like this country specifically and how we're handling the pandemic specifically versus other ones. Like we're taking a lot of social responsibility, like this weight of what other people in our country are doing that we don't really agree with, and that's what's also weighing us down. So it's an uphill battle. Like we're like, look, I feel like we've been battling our whole lives, right, Audrey? Like between you and me, like we've as performers, as people in this type of business, we have been battling for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's just we just got to tighten up the gloves and just go back into the ring. Like that's all we can really do, and it's easier said than done. But just like those social injustices, just like the things that are happening, just like anything, it's all just one conversation at a time. It's one day at a time. It's one thing at a time, like one step at a time. So I think, I try not to get too far ahead of myself. Again, way easier said than done. But yeah, that's how I try to go.
Yeah, and if anything, this proves that you're not alone, right? At the end
Yeah,
of the day,
yeah,
I'm feeling the same thing, you're feeling the same thing.
yeah.
And what is it? I saw something on a billboard on the 10 freeway the other day that said
Hmm.
together alone.
Right, right, right.
It
It
really
is.
is true, right? We're all alone in our homes to whatever extent alone means to you, but
Right.
we're together.
No, it's true. We've never we've never gone through something like this, and I don't think we'll ever go through something like this again in our lifetime specifically. But I do think, yeah, like this is textbook. This is the stuff that like kids who are 5-6 years old right now will be reading about this in their middle school, high school textbooks and talking about what we had to do to try to overcome this. So it is. I think that's why in some ways too, that's like that responsibility that I think of, where it is on us. Like it is on us to try to make this better. It is on us, no matter how, how much harder it can get, how much more divisive, things can get. It's like, it's our responsibility to the best of our ability to do what we can to do our part.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to add, Chris?
Uh, I just want to talk about how great our backgrounds are. Can we just talk
Oh
about that for a
yeah,
second? Because our backgrounds are pretty great. We're like matching, it's pretty
totally. Where
solid.
are you? Is that Venice?
I don't know where I literally typed on Google. I just said dope backgrounds. And then this is the fifth image that popped up. And I'm like, that's the one.
I
That's the
love
one.
it. I know we're totally matching. And I have like the black shirt on, and you have the white, and it's
Yeah.
contrast to the backgrounds.
How have you, well, I would say, like, I mean, you've been asking me all these questions. How have you just been, just from the course of these last, good gosh, what has it been, like 5 months already? How, woo, how would you say you've progressed? Or not even a better question. What do you think you've learned most about yourself in these 5 months?
As an extrovert, my biggest
Mm,
fear was being alone. And I live alone. I'm here alone. I'm the type of person, as you know, Chris, that I'm always out. I'm always
right.
surrounded by people. I'm always doing something. And I think my biggest fear was just to be alone. So I think what I've learned is resilience. And
Yeah.
I'm not truly alone, if that makes any sense,
Yeah.
and I found so many ways to entertain myself, and remote work bay being one of them.
Right. Right.
This project evolved out of quarantine, and so I'm grateful for that, because it's something that it's a passion project I've been wanting to do for several years now, and because of the quarantine and all of this extra time, I've had the ability to start a project like this.
Mm,
So
mm,
and it's funny because it's now so relevant, because all of us are now working from home, right?
right.
Like, so
Right.
you've been working from home like this entire time, so it's different. But now the mass population, more than half of our population, is sitting at home and not able to leave, right? And
Right.
I think, this is the reason why I started this channel, just to help people out, in different industries that might have never done this before, right?
Mhm.
I mean, like for you and I, it's even though like we've been doing this for a long time, like we still had the ability to travel or to go out, right? To meet people.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's still very difficult. Like, would you agree with me? Just to be
I
at
agree.
all day.
Yeah, 100. It's so funny because Imani and I, we talk about this a lot. Like, one of the best reasons of where I live is so good is because I'm walking distance from all these things, or like a movie theater, restaurants, nightlife, at Trader Joe's. It's like there's a lot of great things that are just near me, that you don't have access to really anymore. And so it kind of, I love, I love where I live, but at the same time, I don't get to have the same amenities. So it's like it's sort of a bummer in some ways. But again, like, not worse than what other people are currently going through. But at the same time, I agree. Like, it definitely taught me a level of resiliency. It really reinforced the self-care and kindness in myself. That's something, because it's very easy to be unkind in these situations, or to really, just be depressed.
Yeah.
Like, even honestly, I'll be like forthright. Like, even today, this morning, I was just like, I told Amani, I was like, man, kind of depressed today. And she was like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. I just do, you can't really put a finger on it sometimes, because this is what's happening, and all the things that are happening in the world, in our country. It's like, they're just things that just kind of happen that make you feel pretty sad.
Yeah.
But I also know to not like let that be, a kettlebell tied around my ankle as I'm like in an ocean, to not let it just sink me down, but to just realize, like, you could still swim, you could still find a way to get to shore. And that's something that I think, again, it just takes a lot of practice, but also takes a lot of empathy. And I'm hoping that we can practice a little bit more of that, but it's like, it's not easy, but that's what we do, and that's what we try.
I know. I feel you. Everything that you're saying, I fully have felt in this quarantine. And I mean, it's going to be interesting because, like you said, where is that light at the end of the tunnel? We don't know how long this is
Mm,
going to go for, right? And
mm.
while there are going to be, I think slower phases of reopening, our lives are going to be pretty different. And then
So different.
right, it's beyond work and stuff. I mean, sometimes I see you at festivals, at
Right.
concerts,
Right.
or like I'll
Right.
meet you at a bar, but
Yeah.
I think that's going to look entirely different. Our social lives are going to look completely different. Our professional lives, like we talked about for the last hour, is already entirely
Right.
different. So
Right.
it's going to be interesting to see, how are we going to work on all of our, like, not just self-care but our relationships, right?
Hmm.
When it's weird to, I don't know if you've seen anyone in quarantine at all, but I'm a hugger, and it's weird because you'll see someone and you want to hug them because you haven't seen them in months,
Hmm.
but you're kind of like, okay, wait, whoops, like, should I, hi?
We did this thing like about 2 3 weeks ago. We got together with essentially like four couples essentially. We all got together for a weekend, stayed at a big house, and stayed there for like 3 days essentially. Like it was like a summer camp. But prior to then, we all quarantined for 2 weeks. We all got tested the week before. And we really just it's almost like sex partners in some ways. It's like you have to be very honest about it. It's like, hey, are you doing anything with any other people? Because if you are, then we can't do this. So that and when we were able to do that, and then when we all hung out, I can't tell you how it was the first time. Like I've done social distance hangs, and I've saw like some people here and there social distance wise and keeping it safe, masks on, everything. But this was like the one weekend that we took masks off. We were able to hug. It was like this whoosh, like, man, the mental, like spiritual health was just like it exploded in happiness in some ways, because it just tells you how much you really like just really want that type of human connection. So I feel like there are going to be ways that maybe I guess I don't know, I'm surmising, I'm just guessing, like maybe there will be a lot more smaller type gatherings in the future. Like that's just more like just kind of people just stay within their kind of their cliques a little bit, or their tribes a little bit. And then at least that would, because there's a more of a safety net there too. Concerts, man, I mean I miss going to concerts. Like I don't know what's gonna happen unless they're gonna have, I've seen, I don't know if, I think you've probably seen it more than I have, but I've seen those like mock-ups of festivals where it's like you have your own little booth that's like a full 10 feet from another booth, and you can only stay there and you can see the concert. But I'm
Yeah,
like, man, that's like
so weird.
not that fun because you're not around people's energies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something too that I think of. Like, I don't know what people are going to do, but again, I always the human resiliency never fails me, in my opinion. I mean, some people are taking it too far right now when there's obviously safety, like safe stuff that still needs to happen. But that being said, I do think we'll find a way to get back to a place where it's like, however the 100 years ago of the 1918 flu that happened to how we were able to get to now. I don't think it'll take 100 years, but I'm sure we'll figure out some way.
Right. Or, who knows, new businesses will pop up,
Mhm.
right, that solve these issues that we have right now.
Yeah,
Hopefully, please. But,
please.
like
Yeah.
Airbnb actually evolved out of the 2008 recession. Is that
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Literally,
Yeah.
when the market crashed, that's when Airbnb built its entire business.
Right.
They're
Right.
like, okay,
Wow.
what's the need? There's a need. People can't afford housing when they're like traveling around,
Mhm.
and voila, Airbnb.
So
You know?
that is the one thing, and that's the one thing that I definitely like we try to do too, is just supporting like small businesses as well. It's just like that's such an important thing, just because so many, yeah, like we were just talking about earlier with your friends as well, like a lot of places are hurting. So even whenever, like even restaurants, like we'll try, or even like products, we'll try to just go to that direct business, because you don't want to get taken from third parties or anything like that. So that is something that, again, it's not everything. We can't do everything, and I'm not trying to virtue signal anybody. I'm just saying, like, we try to at least do what we can when it comes to just helping small businesses, because it's not going to be easy for a while.
That's all we can do at this point, is just try to support
Yeah.
in any way that we can, because I think that's what makes LA so amazing too. It's
Hmm.
all those mom and pop shops, those small businesses that
Yeah.
have been around for decades, right? And
Right.
that's the saddest part to me, is to see them close.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel that. And we can only hope that, again, it's like hey, the American spirit, whatever that might be, to just, try to pick things back up, and everyone's going through it. I know you're going through it. I'm going through it. Like we're together alone. Hey, look at that. That was a full wrap around there for you.
Together alone. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much, Chris, for being a
thank
part
you.
of my podcast. I will put all of your information below so people can find you. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much again, and please stay safe.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, and keep doing what you do. I love this podcast. So just keep doing your thing.
Of course. Thanks, Chris.